ये गम के और 4 दिन, सितम के और 4 दिन, ये दिन भी जाएंगे, गुजर गुजर गए 1000 दिन। ये गम के और 4 दिन, सितम के और 4 दिन, ये दिन भी जाएंगे, गुजर गुजर गए 1000 दिन। कभी तो होगी इस चमन पे भी बहार की नजर, कभी तो होगी इस चमन पे भी बहार की नजर। अगर कहीं है स्वर्ग तो उतार ला जमीन पर, तू जिंदा है। 1000 भेष धर के आई मौत तेरे द्वार पर, मगर तुझे न छल सकी, चली गई वो हार कर। 1000 भेष धर के आई मौत तेरे द्वार पर, मगर तुझे पेट में पली अगन पले हैं जल जले, टिके न टिक सकेंगे भूख रोग के स्वराज ये। जमी के पेट में पली अगन पले हैं जल जले, टिके न टिक सकेंगे भूख रोग के स्वराज ये।
फूल हर रंग के आज हर डाल से, फूल हर रंग के आज हर डाल से, नाम कुछ भी सही पर लगन एक है, जोत से जोत दिल की जगा जाएंगे। ऐ वतन हमको तेरी कसम, तेरी राहों में जहाँ तक लुटा जाएंगे। ऐ वतन, ऐ वतन। सह चुके हैं सितम हम बहुत गैर के, अभी गले से लगा जाएंगे। ऐ वतन।
हो 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 है प्रीत जहाँ की रीत सदा, है प्रीत जहाँ की रीत सदा, मैं गीत वहाँ के गाता हूँ। भारत का रहने वाला हूँ, भारत की बात सुनाता हूँ। है प्रीत जहाँ की रीत सदा, हो 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 हो। काले गोरे का भेद नहीं, हर दिल से हमारा नाता है। कुछ और हमें आता ना हो, हमें प्यार निभाना आता है। जिसे मान चुकी सारी दुनिया हो, जिसे मान चुकी सारी दुनिया, मैं बात वही दोहराता हूँ। भारत का रहने वाला हूँ, भारत की बात सुनाता हूँ। है प्रीत जहाँ की रीत सदा, जीते हो किसी ने देश तो क्या, हमने तो दिलों को जीता है। जीते हो किसी ने देश तो क्या, हमने तो दिलों को जीता है। जहाँ राम अभी तक है नर में, नारी में अभी तक सीता है। कितने पावन हैं लोग जहाँ, उतने पावन हैं लोग जहाँ, मैं नित नित शीश झुकाता हूँ। भारत का रहने वाला हूँ, भारत की बात सुनाता हूँ। है प्रीत जहाँ की रीत सदा, हो 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 इतनी ममता नदियों को भी जहाँ माता कह के बुलाते हैं, इतना आदर इंसान तो क्या पत्थर भी पूजे जाते हैं। इस धरती पे मैंने जन्म लिया, इस धरती पे मैंने जन्म लिया, ये सोच सोच इतराता हूँ। भारत का रहने वाला हूँ, भारत की बात सुनाता हूँ। है प्रीत जहाँ की रीत सदा। थैंक यू कॉम्रेड।
करो मिलके ये शोषण का पहिया, मालिकों से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया, जालिमों से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया, मोदी से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया। जाम करो मिलके ये शोषण का पहिया, जाम करो मिलके ये शोषण का पहिया, मोदी से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया। सीने तेरी ही कमाई से चले ये कारखाने, गाइए। तेरी ही कमाई से चले ये कारखाने, मिलते न तुझे को है पेट भर दाने, अरे मिलते न तुझे को है पेट भर दाने। अरे गिद्धों के जैसा तेरे मालिक का रवैया, गिद्धों के जैसा तेरे मालिक का रवैया, मालिकों से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया, जालिमों से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया। जाम करो मिलके ये शोषण का पहिया, मोदी से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया। तुझसे न कम होगी मालिकों की दूरी, अरे तुझसे न कम होगी मालिकों की दूरी, अरे खून चूस चूस के जो देता है मजूरी, अरे खून चूस चूस के जो देता है मजूरी, अरे गिद्धों के जैसा तेरे मालिक का रवैया, गिद्धों, अरे मालिकों से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया, सीने में हमारे तेलंगाना के लड़ैया, बोलिए, अरे सीने में हमारे तेलंगाना के लड़ैया, जोर से, अरे सीने में हमारे तेलंगाना के लड़ैया, अरे मालिकों से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया, अरे जालिमों से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया, अरे जाम करो मिलके ये शोषण का पहिया, जाम करो, जाम करो मिलके ये शोषण का पहिया, अरे मोदी से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया, अरे तड़ी पार से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया, अरे तड़ी पार से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया, जाम करो मिलके ये शोषण का पहिया, जाम करो मिलके मालिकों से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया। अब सीताराम आ नहीं रहे तो एक गाना और सुनाई देता हूँ, अभी भी नहीं आ रहे, वो 2 मिनट लगेगा बता रहे हैं। 320 से लड़ने, अरे 320 से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया, अरे 320 से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया, अदानी अंबानी से लड़ने एक हो जा भैया, जाने वाले सिपाही से पूछो कहाँ जा रहा है, गाइए, जाने वाले सिपाही से पूछो कहाँ जा रहा है, जाने वाले सिपाही से पूछो कहाँ जा रहा है, कौन दुखिया है जो गा रही है, भूखे बच्चों को सहला रही है, कौन दुखिया है जो गा रही है, भूखे बच्चों को सहला रही है, जाने वाले सिपाही से पूछो कहाँ जा रहा है। कॉमरेड सीताराम को लाल सलाम, कॉमरेड सीताराम को लाल सलाम, कॉमरेड सीताराम को लाल सलाम। लाश जलने की बू आ रही है, जिंदगी है कि चिल्ला रही है, लाश जलने की बू आ रही है, जिंदगी है कि चिल्ला रही है, जाने वाले सिपाही से पूछो कहाँ जा रहा है। थैंक यू कॉमरेड। और आखिरी केवल 320 से लड़ने को एक हो जा भैया। थैंक यू कॉमरेड।
Thank you, Comrade Mahapatra. So, comrades, we will have the last session of the 2-day national seminar on the occasion of the 75 years of India's independence. We are very fortunate that we have in our midst Comrade Sitaram Yechury, the General Secretary of the CPIM, and a very close comrade of the members of All India Insurance Employees Association. We are extremely happy that despite all his busy schedules, he took keen interest in coming over to Hyderabad and attend this seminar. So we are thankful to him. So before we start this session, I would request Comrade K. Venugopal, the senior leader of AIEA, to kindly preside over this session. Comrade K. Venugopal. On behalf of all of you comrades, I would now request the speaker of this session, Comrade Sitaram Yechury, to please come onto the stage. I would request Comrade V. Ramesh, the President of AIA, and Comrade Amanullah Khan to please come onto the stage. I am also happy to share with you that amidst us, we have two distinguished participants in this seminar now, Comrade G. N. Devi and Comrade Indu Agnihotri. So I think they prefer to be there and listen to the deliberations. So thank you, comrades.
Comrades, we have Comrade Sitaram Yechury here to speak on the subject of idea of India. There is no need for me to introduce Comrade Sitaram Yechury to you because many of you might be knowing more than what I know about him. One small thing is that he claims, and that is true, as an honorary, if not honorary, a special member of the All India Insurance Employees Association. In fact, right from his younger days as SFI president, he was very much associated with our organization at various levels. 2000 Madras Conference, then 2003 Raipur Conference, 2014 Nagpur Conference. All these three conferences, Comrade Sitaram Yechury was there in the All India Insurance Employees Association conference. There is Central Zone, South Central Zone, South Zone, Western Zone, and perhaps Eastern Zone and East Central Zone. Many of these zones, the zonal conferences were also inaugurated by him. That's why he was claiming, and I also confirmed, that is a special, if not honorary, he is a very, very special member of the All India Insurance Employees Association. So, no need of introducing him to you, but one or two things. He was basically from Andhra Pradesh, but he studied in Hyderabad. And due to some problems in this region at that time in 69, he had to shift to. And he stood All India #1 in the CBSE examinations at that time. Topper of the CBSE. Went on to study in JNU. He became the president of the Jawaharlal Nehru University Students' Union. And some time ago, I came across a letter a memorandum which, as JNU president, he has submitted to Mrs. Indira Gandhi, that you should step down as the chancellor of this university, because under you, the democracy was almost butchered and emergency was launched. So we do not expect such people to be the chancellors. And she was forced to listen to the memorandum through and through. Of course, finally he went away in a huff, but she resigned in that evening. And that was the guts with which he used to lead the students' movement. So we have that comrade. He is the secretary, general secretary of the Communist Party of India, Marxist. A person who can definitely give a clear outline of the political situation in this country. He knows the insurance employees movement. And in fact, I was telling him, we initially thought that there can be a class of secretariat or some other things, but in this situation, there should be these classes or these seminars should be for all the cadres down the line, and this is an all India nature. It is not confined to a state. This seminar is of all India nature, and that's what I was telling him. So he was asking whether I can place it straightly. I said, we expect you to place it very straightly so that our comrades will be benefited with the submissions and your speeches here. So now, without taking much of your time, I invite Comrade Sitaram Yechury, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of India Marxists, to place his views on the subject of idea of India.
Thank you, Comrade Venugopal. All the comrades on the dais. Comrade Amanullah Khan just reminding me, one of the collateral damages of Modi government is that I have not come to an LIC function after 2014. After Modi became the Prime Minister. And it's very strange, even I was surprised, because the rapidity with which I used to attend your functions. But anyway, I'm so happy and glad that I'm able to meet all of you here. And you're one of the most premium unions and trade union movements, and who's in the midst of a very big struggle now. And all the years that I used to attend your conferences were the years when we were actively preventing the government from privatizing the LIC. But since I stopped coming to your meetings in 2014, now it has happened. I won't give the stick to Modi, but anyway, this is what you're in the midst of a very big battle. I can only express my solidarity and our support and our hope and confidence that you will win and you'll ultimately prevail in stopping this sales of these shares. One round is over, but I'm sure the government is also rethinking about it because they're not getting as much as what they want. So let us see. But your unity and your struggle is the most important element. So wish you all the best in our solidarity with you in this struggle. Well, you asked me to speak on the idea of India. Normally, this will appear as a very esoteric subject, very abstract subject. I mean, what is this idea that we are talking of? But today, in the 75th anniversary, the challenges that we are facing is precisely against this very concept of the idea of India. Now, the challenges being mounted by the creation of a new India, as Modi would like to call it, is actually the destruction of the India that we have known, or the idea of India, and the creation of an India in accordance with their understanding of it being a rabidly intolerant, fascistic Hindutva Rashtra. Now, what are all these concepts that have come up, and what is the battle that is currently going on? The attack on the Constitution, the attack on the constitutional institutions, the attack on democratic rights and civil liberties, they are all part of the larger battle over this concept of idea of India. And that is something very important for all of us to understand today. What is the actual nature of the beast that we are fighting today? And where does their ideas and their thoughts and all that emerge from? Now, to understand this concept of idea of India, you will have to go back a little into the historical background of our struggle for independence and freedom, and also the background of how nation states emerged. A nation state or a country, so which is in modern terms it's called a country, they didn't exist in the nature that they are existing today. Some, let's say 600 years ago, 600 years ago. In the transition of human civilization from feudalism to capitalism was also a transition from breaking the link between the state and the religious institutions. That is in Europe mainly, which is where this transition began. There it was breaking the link between the state and the church. So separation of the church from the state meant what? That the kings and emperors of the feudal era, they drew their sanction saying that they had the divine right to rule. Even today, the Raja of Nepal claims Vishnu gives him the authority to rule. So they draw that authority from the divinity. Now, once you break that link, once that is broken up, a new psychology of your existence within a society emerged, whereby it is no longer the god and the king, but it is the state and the citizen. So the concept of a citizen emerged with the emergence of capitalism, where the church had to be separated from the state, and that was required for capitalist development, that you don't have the authority in any monarch with a divine right, but it is something where people are involved, because people's involvement in production is essential for capitalist development. That's why whether it's in other attributes like education, like health, etc., they want healthy people who can be exploited. Otherwise, capitalism cannot make its profits. So you have to have these attributes. So the emergence of the nation state, a long drawn out battle, it went on for about nearly 500 years. And later in the 17th century, middle of the 17th century, 1648, I think, the Westphalia, there's a place in Germany, that's where all these warring lords met. And then the treaties of Westphalia were drawn out, which for the first time talks about a nation state. The concept of nation, national rights, national sovereignty, many of the international laws that are there today, all owe their origin to the Westphalia Treaty. All these, some of the international laws that still survive. And from this concept emerged a nation and therefore nationalism. What was nationalism? In the birth of the nation state, nationalism was the rule of the majority. And slowly over a period of time, this emerged as the rule of the majority over a minority. In Europe, you had the Jews, you had the Irish, they were the minorities. So the English versus Irish, the English state, the Irish minority. And later, the occupation of Ireland, etc., the separate story. No, therefore, the concept was to find a minority within your state. That is to find an enemy within yourself. And that enemy, to propagating against that minority with this concept of majoritarianism, that became the concept of nationalism, what we call bourgeois nationalism. Bourgeois nationalism, the rising bourgeoisie, they had to identify an enemy within, so that became the majoritarian state, and nationalism became the majoritarian nationalism. This is how the evolution took place. I mean, it's a very long story, I'm putting it in a nutshell. Evolution took place in the European part when the transition from feudalism to capitalism was going on. But once this process was over, when you reached the 19th, 20th centuries, when colonization began and colonies were established, after the Second World War, again a long story, cut it short, after the Second World War, in the process of decolonization that took place all over the world, mainly in Asia and Africa, in the process of decolonization, many different concepts of nation arose. And they were connected with the struggles of the people in these colonies for their own independence. You had in Africa an African nationalism. I mean, with all these African leaders, you had in Northern Africa, you had nationalism of the variety of Nasser, and you had the Egyptian nationalism, Sudanese nationalism, you had Iraq and Iran. They were all very powerful progressive movements then. Iran particularly was a very strong communist party at the moment there. So all these different variants of this concept of what should that nation be arose. It is in that process that the whole question, I mean, this issue of idea of India was born in India during our freedom struggle. So idea of India, the BJP today brushes it aside, saying it's an abstract, it's only an idea. So it has not got anything to do with, practical reality. But that's far from the truth, in the sense that idea of India was what? Is the recognition of what is India. Now, what is this India with so much of diversity? In the note that I had written, I circulated some figures that pertain to 20, 30 years old data. I mean, that has to be updated, but Modi government is a no data government, so we don't know, we don't know what is there, how do you update it. But the number of languages you have, the number of cultural differences we have, the number of religions that are there, and the number of customs and traditions that separate us, and within the same religious community also. There's very little between the Kerala Mopala Muslim and the Assamese, Hazarika Muslims, you have them. I mean, there's very little in common between them. But they all are put under one umbrella of saying Muslims. The same is true with the Hindus. In fact, our diversity is much more. Much more. I mean, if we have time, then later I can tell you an interesting story of Ravanayana as opposed to Ramayana. And that was very popular when I was a youngster in the south, and where there's no hero or villain in Ravanayana. Well, it's a different, it'll take away a lot of time now. Let me not go into that. No, the diversity, you have to understand. You see, I'll put it very briefly. It has got as many shlokas as, Ramayana has. The same number of chapters. But the whole thing begins with what? Ravanayana is the story of Ravana. Ramayana also accepts that Ravana was a very knowledgeable Brahmin. He was a great Pandit. He was a great Shiv Bhakt. And it is supposed to be that when Shiva used to do his Tandav, Ravana used to provide the music. And one day Shiva was very pleased with Ravana, with the music he provided. So he told Ravana, you choose any boon you want. So Ravana said, okay, I should not die. No human or an animal form can kill me. So Shiva, as usual, when he is happy, he said, Tadhastu, and went. So Ravana comes back to Lanka. He continues to rule. Thousands of years have gone. He gets bored of ruling. He said, I want moksha. But for moksha, you have to die. No, he can't die and nobody can kill him. So how does he get moksha? Ravanayana is story about Ravana's moksha. So then he says what to do. In those times, there's one mythological figure called Narada Muni. When you have any problem, you go to him. And he always has a solution for all problems. So this Narada Muni, Ravana goes and Narada Muni says, you're a fool, why did you ask for such a boon? Ravana says, okay, I'm a fool, but now what is the answer? Way out. So he says, human being can't kill you. Animal or insect can't kill you. The only person who can kill you is God himself. So in Falana Yuga, God will come in the form of Rama. So there you do some tigdam. You pick up a fight with Rama. And in that fight with Rama, you must ensure that you get killed by him. That's the only way you'll get moksha. So the long story, you cut it short, but that's why Ravana kidnaps Sita. Now your Valmiki Ramayana also says that Ravana is very respectful to Sita. He does not disrespect her at all. But then why kidnap her then? If you didn't want to do anything with her, why did you kidnap her? You kidnapped her because you were asking Rama you were forcing Rama to come to take her. So when Rama comes to Lanka, long story again, cut it short, comes to Lanka, this fight begins. When the fight begins, Rama is cutting Ravana's head, one more head comes. More heads he cuts, the same number of heads come. So then Ravana gets a doubt, saying if Rama also gets bored of cutting my heads and goes away, then what happens to my moksha? So then he sends our Vibhishna to tell Ravana where to hit the arrow. So Vibhishna goes and tells Ram that the arrow should be hit in the navel, in the Nabha, solar plexus, so that his Amrit that is there can be burst open and he can be destroyed. So finally Rama hits that arrow and Ravana gets his moksha. So the whole story is how Ravana got his moksha. That's why in Ram Leela you don't burn Vibhishna. You know, it is said that he helped Rama against Ravana. But he was actually Ravana's agent to Rama, who told him how to kill him. Now in this there is no hero, no villain, no good, no evil. It's a simple, straightforward story. Now instead of that, in the northern tradition you have a hero, villain, evil, bad, good, bad, evil, etc., destruction of evil and all this. So in the South Indian tradition of this Ravana, none of that is there. Now who is the better? If Ravana was the villain, why did Shiva give the boon to him? Why did he kidnap Sita and do nothing with her? So all these, this diversity that is there in our traditions is such that how do you keep this country together? If this country has to remain together, then you have to recognize each one of these diversities, not only recognize, but respect them with equality. Now, the concept of idea of India evolved during the freedom struggle in the movement in the early decades of the 20th century. That is, by the time of the end of the First World War, 1915, there was a big turmoil that was going on in the national movement. You had the formation of the Gadar Party, which in 1905, which was the first one to give the call for complete freedom. But it was formed in San Francisco and in the eastern coast of Northern America. And then from there, they started coming back to India to organize an armed revolution. The first one of the conspiracy cases, the Peshawar conspiracy cases, is against these Gadar Party people coming in. And then at that time, a few years later, Mahatma Gandhi's non-cooperation movement, the first one, he withdraws that non-cooperation movement after Chauri Chaura incident, which even Nehru called it a Himalayan blunder. Now, at that time when he withdrew that movement, and already a big struggle going on between what are called the moderates and the revolutionaries in the freedom struggle, a lot of questions started throwing up when Gandhiji withdrew that thing after Chauri Chaura, that non-cooperation movement. What is the way forward? You had the formation of the Hindustan Socialist Republican Army of Bhagat Singh and Rajguru, Sukhdev, etc. And you had, at the same time, various other revolutionary movements that came up, Anushilan, Jugantar in the Bengal part of it, the erstwhile Bengal part of it. And you had other groups in the early Punjab province. And during this period, all the question that arose was, how do we move forward? What is the meaning of independent India? What is its character? And in this process, in 1920, the Communist Party of India was formed in Tashkent. Immediately after that, the communists intervened in the national movement. And in the 1921 Ahmedabad session, the Communist Party of India, for the first time on behalf of the Communist Party of India, communists used to attend the AICC those days. Communist Party of India, a resolution is moved for complete independence. Gandhiji at that time was talking about dominion status. That is, all Indians must be treated as British citizens. But the communists were the first one, they said, no, that was not it. We want our own independence. And who moved that resolution? At the Ahmedabad Congress, it will be interesting in today's times, one Maulana Hasrat Mohani, Maulana, and other Swami Kumarananda. A Maulana and a Swami, on behalf of the Communist Party of India, moved the resolution for complete independence. And Gandhiji did not accept, only finally in the 1929 that we finally gave the Purna Swaraj slogan. Since then, every year, to every IICC session, the communists used to present a manifesto on what should be the direction of the national movement. And those were the times when communal rights were also on the rise. I'll come to that point later. But the communists actively played the role and started organizing the workers first. In the 1920s, you had the AITUC being formed. And then, subsequently, in 1936, you had the Kisan Sabha, you had the SFI, Progressive Writers. So different sections were being organized by the Communist Party as part of the freedom struggle to strengthen the struggle for freedom. And of course, this culminated in the post-Second World War period, when the communists led struggles, particularly the Kisan struggles, the peasant struggles, Punna Pravailar in Kerala, the Varli uprising in Maharashtra, the Tebaga movement in Bengal, the Surma Valley struggle in Assam. And the highlight of all this was the Telangana armed struggle in Telangana here, and which lasted for 3 years. Thousands of villages were liberated. And that upsurge brought in actually two things which changed the character of the freedom struggle also. One brought in is that the exploited sections of rural India were brought into the mainstream of the struggle for freedom. Congress party was trying to co-opt the exploiting sections, that is the landlords, the trusteeship, which Mahatma Gandhi gave, the slogan, that they were actually co-opting the exploiting sections of rural India, and eventually they became part of the Indian ruling classes post-independence, the bourgeois landlord alliance. So the bourgeoisie was bringing up the landlords and the rural rich, who were the exploiters. The communists were mobilizing the exploited sections and brought them into the freedom movement. The second thing that all this did was brought into central focus, into the agenda, the issue of land reforms. The Zamindari abolition, which came up also. I mean, central to all this was the communist contribution of these struggles that brought in there. And land reforms, mind you, the difference between Bangladesh and Pakistan and India is actually lag. In India also, land reforms have hardly been implemented, except for, some statutory abolition of Zamindari in that old sense. But except in J&K and the left-ruled states, Bengal and Kerala, mainly, it has not been implemented. But nevertheless, that abolition of Zamindari, however limited it was the one that liberated a lot of the rural youth to move into education, and that is what created the great Indian middle class. What is lacking in Pakistan and Bangladesh is that middle class, which emerged in India because of the land reform movement. No, like this, the communists in various aspects contributed to the advance of the freedom struggle. And while these contributions were going on, eventually, post-independent India, they were reflected, whether it's the linguistic organization of Indian states. Communists were the first ones. Even during the free Telangana struggle, I think, Comrade Sundaraya wrote that Vishalandrilo Prajarajyo, that was before independence, that people's rule in Vishalandra, that is, all Telugu-speaking people, Aike Kerala in Kerala, Sanyut Maharashtra in Maharashtra, all these movements led by communists created the ground for the eventual formation of the linguistic states. But these were sort of contributions that the communists were making to to radicalize the agenda of the freedom movement. But in that process of the 1920s decade particularly, I'm talking of the struggles from 1920s onwards to nearly 45, till we got our independence. And those, in the 1920s, all these discussions led to, after the withdrawal of the non-cooperation movement, to questions on what is the character of independent India. And in these discussions, many views came up, but to crystallize them, you can say the three mainstream views emerged. One was the mainstream view that given India's diversity, given India's heterogeneity, the only way in which we can keep this country together is through a political structure of a secular democratic republic. So secular democratic republic was the only political structure through which this country can be kept united. That was the mainstream vision that was articulated by the Motilal Nehru Commission in 1928, which found reflection in the Karachi Resolution of 1929. This concept was the mainstream concept. The communists agreed with it, but said you can't stop there. That was the second vision. He said the political freedom we achieve must be converted into the economic freedom of every individual. Therefore, this secular democratic republic must move towards socialism, whereby you have the economic equality for every individual. So communists said that this is not the end of the matter, a secular democratic republic. And the communists also said, and we continue and we maintain, and we got vindicated, that if we don't move towards socialism, then this secular democratic foundations itself will be threatened. And that is what, unfortunately, our later decades vindicated, that this, instead of moving towards giving equality, what the Constitution promises, equality, political, social, and economic, instead of moving towards that, if we move in the opposite direction, then this entire political structure itself will be under jeopardy, will be threatened. And this warning of the communists, and that was a critique of the Congress party, particularly post-independence, when they started implementing the independent path of capitalist development, that this is what you are leading up to, this whole political structure itself will become undermined. These were the first two visions. The third vision that emerged during the same process was a vision that argued that the character of independent India must be based on the religious affiliation of its people. Now, this vision had a twin expression. One expression was the articulation of the RSS vision of a fascistic Hindu or Hindutva Rashtra, as it's called. And the other twin brother of this vision was the Muslim League's articulation of a Muslim state. So this is third vision. At the time of the independence, unfortunately, Jinnah succeeded with his argument of a Muslim state aided by the British. Partition took place, unfortunately. But in India, the Indian national movement and the freedom movement rejected that concept and asserted the secular democratic republic, which found its way in our constitution. It is that rejection which was actually the reason for Gandhiji's assassination, saying that if Pakistan can be formed as a Muslim state, why are you preventing a Hindu state in India? And that was entirely connected with this concept of the idea of India that emerged during this debates around these three visions. And what was that idea? Not merely the recognition of our diversity, not merely an respect to that diversity by granting equality to all our diverse expressions, but to make it an inclusionary India, whereby increasingly those who are socially marginalized, those who are linguistic minorities. That's why the Constitution, if you see today, it says linguistic and religious minorities. Minorities are both together. Recognizing their right to include them. Idea of India means an inclusionary India. Whereas the Hindutva Rashtra and the nationalism that the BJP and the right-wing forces represent is a throwback to the Westphalia concept of a majoritarian nationalism. where you look for an enemy within. And that enemy in India, that within enemy in India is primarily the Muslims. So the majority over the minority, the expression of majority nationalism, that is why for the Hindutva ideologues, nationalism means majority nationalism. Nationalism means Hindutva nationalism. But for the idea of India, the concept that means that nationalism means Indian nationhood. It is not Hindutva nationalism or like Jinnah's Muslim nationalism, Islamic nationalism or Muslim nationalism, but it is Indianhood, the consciousness of an Indianhood whereby you have a common thing going above these differences. And it is idea of India is actually the emergence of the consciousness of an Indianhood that incorporates, subsumes all the diversities and differences that we have. And it is this concept of idea of India that is today under assault. That inclusive India, not an exclusive India, not an India to the exclusion of the Muslims to begin with. I'll come to the other part of it. But this is the basic battle that is going on today. The battle between these three visions that I've just articulated is the same battle that is continuing for over a century now, but is finding expression in this manner today, whereby the secular democratic India's structures and foundations have to be destroyed if the vision of the Hindutva Rashtra has to succeed. So that's today the assaults you find on the constitution, democratic rights, what we began with, all the assaults today are part of the battle of these visions. And this battle, as I said, starts about a century ago. It was in 1923 that Savarkar wrote a small booklet on Hindutva. And in that booklet, he says that Hindutva has nothing to do with Hindu religion. In fact, Savarkar himself was an atheist, but he had nothing to do with the practice of Hindu religion. He says it's a political project. And what is this political project according to them? That all those whose Matrubhumi, Pitrubhumi and Punyabhumi is in this part, they are the only ones who can stay here. Those whose Punyabhumi is outside, they cannot be part of this India. So Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, everybody, they're all religions born here, so their Punyabhumi is here. But Muslims with the Mecca and Christians with their Jerusalem, Bethlehem, that holy land, so they are not to be here. And to achieve this Hindutva Rashtra, what did he give the slogan? Militarize the Hindus, Hinduize the military, and militarize Hindudom. That's the word he used then, the Hindudom. Your Agnipath today is precisely the implementation of that. Militarize the Hindus, Hinduize the militaridom. 1925, the RSS is born out of this. And RSS, on the basis of this understanding and ideology, their vision is for the first time very clearly articulated by Golwalkar in 1939, when he writes the small book. The discussion was on Swaraj. So RSS said, Swaraj. What is the Swaraj? Who is the Swa? This Raj is for whom? Who is the Swa? Who are we or our nationhood defined? Swaraj means who is the Swa? The Swa is Hindus. And then they give a long explanation and theory, distorting science, distorting history, distorting everything. And today, more and more evidence is coming of how they are wrong. I'll come to, saying that it's only Hindus who have been inhabiting this place for 5,000 years. All the others who have come are all aliens. That is why Modi, when he first time, I was in Parliament then, when he spoke for his first speech, he says his task was to liberate India from 1200 years of slavery. So I tell you, 1200 years of slavery means, so we all went back dating, you know, what does the 1200 mean? The establishment of the Delhi Sultanate. Then the first, Muslim kingdom came up on these parts of the land. So that is the liberation. That Hindus have been under siege. And therefore, this is the whole concept, therefore, was that Golwalkar provided not only the theory saying Swa means Hindu Raj, Swaraj means Hindu Raj or Hindutva Raj. That is the what we have to achieve. In order to achieve that, they said, then it all came up with the mingling with the religious texts and religion, saying that Aryaputra, or we the Aryans, we are the ones who are the original inhabitants of this. And today the evidence has come of the ancient, all of us know in genetics, a lot of research is going on. The genome has been prepared for the whole thing. Now ancient genes are being investigated upon. So last week, and today it's reported in the papers, the Aryan gene was investigated and it was matched. And it was said that the Harappan civilization, Indus Valley civilization, nobody there of the evidence of the skeletons you have of the gene pool, there's no Aryan gene found in the Harappan civilization. So Aryan gene is first found in India 500 years after the Indus Valley civilization vanishes. And it has been, its origins have been located from Central Asia. And then one more thing, a very interesting thing came up, that at that point of time, for 1,000 years after that, the genetic investigation shows that there was no endogamy in India. Means people marrying within the same caste. Today you look at the matrimonial columns in your papers, everybody asks for a match in the, not only caste, subcaste. You know, people living in USA who have not touched India for 3 generations, 4 generations, they want to marry in their subcaste. They have the complete equality. But in India, they want the woman to be part of that subcaste. Now this endogamy comes 1,000 years later. So that 1,000 years. Now more interesting historical research should come out. I mean, Comrade BTR used to say that your generation is very cursed generation because you won't be in jail for a long time like we all did. So that's the only time when you can read and write. But in Modi's jails, you don't even be allowed to read and write. That is the problem. But when did that endogamy come? With the reassertion of the Brahminical order. This is not proven yet. This is what my reading is. Reassertion of the Brahminical order. When did that happen? In the 7th century AD with Adi Shankara and the Advaita that comes in. Until then, for a millennia, the official or the major religion that was embraced by the people is Buddhism. All these scientific and great achievements that Modi and the RSS talks of, that India's scientific achievements in the past, the glory of the past, all this is traceable to the Buddhist period. Why? Because there was greater equality. Knowledge could reach to more people without any impediments. Anyway, that's a separate story altogether. So historically, therefore, this third vision of this Hindutva thing, that as it emerged to say that in this land, all religious minorities who do not follow the Hindu way of life, the Hindu thought, can at best live as second-class citizens and live at the whims and fancies of the dominant religion, that is the Hindus. And this is the ideological basis on the basis of which this poisonous campaigns of hate and violence are spread. But along with this, Golwalkar also created the organizational structure. after the ban on RSS, after Mahatma Gandhi's assassination, the RSS, it negotiated and went through very deceitful compromises, and finally the ban was withdrawn on the condition, many conditions, but on the condition, one condition, RSS will not participate in politics. If RSS did not participate in politics, it required a political front. So that political front was first created in 1952 with the Janasangh, which merged with the Janata Party and later the BJP. The BJP or the Janasangh earlier is actually the political arm of the RSS. To say they are different is absolutely, ridiculous, in the sense it is the origin it's the political arm of it. So BJP in government is actually furthering the fascistic agenda of the Hindutva Rashtra of the RSS. Now, if this fascistic agenda had to come about, because in the third vision, which I was talking about, the twin brothers, Hindutva Rashtra and the Islam and the Muslim state, it was actually between these two visions, it was Savarkar who was the first to advance the theory that in India there are two nations, a Muslim and a Hindu. 1937 presidential address to the Hindu Mahasabha. He makes this assertion for the first time. And 1940 or 39, at the presidential address to the Muslim League, Jinnah repeats this assertion 2 years later. And then subsequently Savarkar says, I agree with Mr. Jinnah's notion. In India, there are two nations, one Muslim, one Hindu. So this two-nation theory, which is the cause for the separation and the partition, the origin also lies with them. They are the ones who brought in this two-nation theory in order to achieve their Hindutva Rashtra, which suited Jinnah and the Muslim League in order to achieve their Muslim Rashtra. So it suited each other. That's why these are twin brothers. So on this basis, you find they continued, but after independence, after Gandhiji's assassination, unfortunately, many people thought that the battle has ended. There is no longer a threat of this fascistic Hindu or Hindutva Rashtra. That was the biggest mistake that was made, despite many of the radical left, particularly the communists, warning that you're making this mistake, don't give them legitimacy. They'll again come back, because if you remember, against emergency during JP movement, the party, we took the stand, we are fighting emergency, we fought emergency, we went to jail, everything else. But we did not join the JP movement when he said, because he went and brought the RSS along. I said, do not legitimize it. You will get into trouble, and that is exactly. Then IAS officer Mr. Devasahayam, who was with Jayaprakash Narayan when he was under house arrest, he recalls, so recently he's given all the details of how JP regretted having brought in and having believed the Vajpayee and Advani then, saying that they'll give up their RSS background and join the Janata Party. They did not, and the dual membership thing would destroy the Janata Party government. And the Indian political history went through a different direction. That's a different point. But this is the battle that is continuing, that has been continuing all these 75 years. And with the Modi government coming in 2014, and particularly after 2019, with a majority by themselves, Vajpayee did not have a majority in his own. That's why they couldn't proceed with this. Even in Modi first government, you still had non-BJP partners here. I mean, you had a JDU ministers, you had Akali Dal, you had all these people, Shiv Sena. But 2019 is only purely BJP, and therefore they have embarked on a full right destruction of our constitutional order. J&K, Article 370 abolition, one of their demands. Ayodhya, after the Supreme Court verdict, its verdict. Supreme Court delivered a verdict, but not justice in that Ayodhya dispute. And then you had After that, now every single dispute will be open. It's already opened up. Mathura, your Gyanvapi in Banaras, your Gyanvapi mosque and that Vishnath temple thing. Everything will now be opened up. And that is the manner in which this Hindutva Rashtra establishment moving towards that. This new narrative is being created. And that narrative is, whether it's in the Ayodhya temple, beginning of the construction of the temple, Prime Minister does it, presence of President of India, in the presence of Governor of UP, Chief Minister of UP, it's a state function. When the Constitution explicitly debars the Indian state from being identified, state or government, being identified with any one religion or faith. And now, the national emblem on top of the new parliament, again with the Hindu ritual, the puja, and that is again saying that this is the Hindutva Rashtra. And that is what, is being clearly conveyed. That is the new India that is being created. But if you require that new India, this constitution cannot exist, which talks of secular democratic republic, which talks of equality, which talks of all these things. This constitution has to go. So therefore the assault on the constitution. 4 foundational pillars of the constitution. Your secular democracy, economic sovereignty. It's not economic self-reliance, it's economic self-sovereignty. And social justice and federalism, center-state relations. All 4 of them are today under severe assault. We have never seen this sort of a complete loot of our national assets that is taking place, like it is taking place today. And today this Prime Minister talks of the saying Revdi culture. और उसने पिछले कितने 5 सालों में 10 लाख करोड़ रुपए के कर्ज जो है बैंकों से जो उसके मित्र लिए हैं बने उसको माफ कर दी 10 लाख करोड़ अपने किसान की मतलब उसके 20,000 30,000 जो कर्जा लेता उसको माफ करना मतलब वो रेवड़ी कल्चर ये जो कर रहा है ये इन्वेस्टमेंट है मतलब ये इंसेंटिव है अब this sort of a loot that we are seeing in this country, the public sector, wholesale thing, etc., completely. Now, if you want to establish and succeed in creating a fascistic project in India, you require the support of international capital, you require the support of imperialism. If you require that support, then what is to be done? You go and join imperialist alliances. You are a member of the Quad now. Your strategic alliance with the USA deepens. You have become a strategic military partner of US imperialism in South Asia. And you have joined all the exercises US aiming at China. India is now an integral part of all that. So American capital, you tell them, please come and loot India. I'll permit you. I will support you in all your strategic foreign policy initiatives. So you don't talk about what is happening inside India. That is my business. You will get what you want. You want your profits, you want your support, I'll give it to you. And to the Indian ruling classes, the Indian capitalist class, you say, I'm looting India, I'll allow you to loot India. Ambani, Adani, that is your 320 tomorrow, na? 320 ka slogan. So anything that you do, Adani became, during these last 2 years, he is number 4th highest billionaire in the world today. He's grown to that level. Anything. And how the laws are totally changed with impunity and misuse. Whether it's in Rafale, whether it's in this coal imports, how Adani is being getting all the everything and anything that he wants. And therefore you find the economic sovereignty, you find secularism and democracy. There are at least 9 states in the country where you have love jihad laws now. Any interfaith marriage in India in any BJP ruled state, you're bound to be in jail. Because you have to prove that you have not been forcibly converted. And when a law provides a woman can be a Hindu or a Muslim and a man can be a Hindu or a Muslim, they can both retain their religions and still be married. That is your law today. No, the presumption is if you both are interfaith marriage, that means one of you have converted. That means it's a forced conversion. That means still you prove it is not a forced conversion, you are in jail. So, like this, the question of assault, the bulldozer politics, the hijab or azan or your, halal, or whatever terms that they use, everything is to divide the Indian people between Hindus and Muslims, and on the basis of hatred, poisonous, fake news, false news, and then create these tensions. The more the tensions are created, the greater is the creation of a false consciousness of Hindutva among the people. That's why when comrades ask, many of you ask, big Kisan struggle took place. Big struggles your working class is doing against all this privatization. But still, when elections come, how does he manage to win? That is when the consciousness, false consciousness that is generated and created, for that these campaigns of hatred and campaign of hatred and poisonous hatred and terror is what creates that sort of a situation. You had demonetization, you had your GST, you had your migrant labor crisis, you had your COVID Delta wave, those mass funerals and burials and whatever you had, people dying for lack of oxygen. And then you have all this Kisan struggle, everything is. Then how does it? So that's why only struggles on economic issues without struggling against this consciousness that is being created, without Hindutva, they will not succeed. We'll have to combine the two. And that is what we'll have to consciously undertake if we have to weaken them. But that is also a big uphill task increasingly as time goes by, because it's not only the foundations of the Constitution that are being destroyed, but it is also the institutions under the Constitution, starting from the Parliament itself. Our Constitution says, we the people of India, हम लोग, वहाँ से शुरू होता है. हम लोग का मतलब क्या? The sovereignty in the country is with the people. It is we the people. How does the sovereignty exercised by the people? The people whom they elect to the legislature. Those people, elected people, are accountable to the people. The government that is formed on the basis of the majority of legislators, that government is accountable to the legislature. The executive, legislature and judiciary, the three wings of our Constitution. If the legislature doesn't work, then the government's accountability doesn't exist, no need. And accountability to the people does not exist. Because there is nothing the MP can be accountable to, because nothing is happening in the Parliament. That is what is the Parliament reduced. 27 MPs have been expelled, suspended this time. So destroying the Parliament. Judiciary, 3 years now. All the challenges, including my challenges against the Article 370 abrogation, against CAA, against electoral bonds, none of that. Even they've not even begun hearing. And then you have your election commission, the only authority mandated to hold a free and fair election. If that is compromised, then your democracy is destroyed. And then you have your ED and your CBI. Now with the new judgment on the ED has complete, total authority in dictatorial rights. They can pick you up, keep you in custody. You can't even go to a court saying that I want relief or a bail, because they don't even serve you an FIR. The ED report is not served on you. So what will you go to the court with? Court will say, bring a document, bring something. There's nothing. Only law has given them the authority. Until you prove yourself innocent, you are under custody. And like this, how many have they arrested now? And the courts facilitate the arrest of people like Tista Setalwar. Zubair Ahmed, after a big fight, you managed to get him on an interim bail, that also. Bhima Koregaon, they're still lying there after 3 years without any cognizable charge being proved on them. So it's completely, I mean, this is an authoritarian assault on every dissent of this government treated as enemy of the nation, to be put under your draconian preventive detention where there's no bail, UAPA, sedition, etc. So, I mean, if these institutions are used as political agents of the ruling party, then your democracy cannot, and this constitutional order cannot be preserved. And that is exactly what is happening now. Each one of these institutional manners which is being used, and now you see people saying, but BJP has got so much majority. I told them, please count. I mean, how many BJP MPs and MLAs are not the original BJP? The majority are from other parties. Today, the general saying is that चुनाव कोई भी जीते बीजेपी सरकार बनाएगा. Anybody, you can defeat the BJP, but eventually they'll make the government. So that is how the mockery of this whole democracy has been brought to. So in order to achieve this complete destruction of the constitution and the constitutional institutions, so that their Hindutva Rashtra can be established, what I was telling you earlier, the creation of the false consciousness of Hindutva, the overarching Hindutva, that whatever be your physical condition, whatever be the assaults on your day-to-day life, your consciousness is such that finally he said, no, only they will get my preference. That sort of a consciousness, how do they achieve it? Finally, this is the last point I want to make after we take a break. How do they manage to achieve this? There was a very eminent Marxist scholar, a philosopher, George Lucas, who was also a big on cultural issues, he used to write. George Lucas was a communist before the Second World War began. He was also part of the people Hitler had oppressed. And he started work on a question that arose in his mind, saying that the German people, after all, amongst all the enlightened, educated Western people, German people are the inheritors of the most progressive, rationalist philosophical traditions of Hegel, later Marx, of Kant. I mean, all the modern philosophical traditions, rational philosophy, was originated in Germany. How are the German people who are trained in that tradition, who are inheritors of that legacy, accept Hitler's Nazism and fascist philosophy? After all, Germans accepted that, like Indians are accepting this philosophy today. Why did these people accept? Started working on this very important question and then after the war only, he could manage to get his work published, and that is now available. Luckily in India, we also persuaded some publishers where it's called The Destruction of Reason. Destruction of Reason by George Lucas. You must procure that book if you can, and it's now been republished by Akar publication. Now, what he draws up is that for a fascist philosophy to grip the minds of the people, the essential prerequisite is to destroy rationality and destroy reason, replacing rationality with irrationality and reason with unreason is the foundation for the fascist philosophies and ideologies to thrive. What is rationality? At any point of time, what you see, I see, we all see. Nobody, none of us can comprehend the entire reality of what we see. I mean, we can't really explain everything that we see. What does rationality tell you? What you cannot understand, you investigate. You investigate, try to see why this is happening or why this has happened, and then you will come to your conclusions of, I mean, you'll come to the right reasoning. What does irrationality say? You cannot understand this. Only supernatural or God can understand this. So you have faith in God. That power will explain to you what that is. So faith replaces reasoning. So faith becomes the basis to say, as an excuse, to say, I don't understand this, and therefore I say this is God. I mean, God has done this. So increasingly, you put your entire thinking process at the basis of the faith or the supernatural, and give up this scientific inquiry process and accept faith. The moment you give up the scientific inquiry process, you become victims for obscurantism, blind faith, superstition, and backwardness. And that is what today happens. People are actually thoroughly enjoying and lapping it up when your Prime Minister says, how can Draupadi produce 100 male children? Gandhari, sorry. How can Gandhari produce 100 male children in one lifetime? Is it possible for any woman to produce that many male children? Even that many children, but even then male children. I mean, only male children 100, no sisters at all. How is it? So then he said, the only way is test tube babies. So those days we had test tube babies. Science advanced. And people are accepting it. He said, who could have created Ganesha but greatest of plastic surgeons? And in India, we could put the head of an elephant on a human being and create Ganesha. Look at our advance in science. And people are accepting. So the moment you have faith replacing scientific inquiry, you will have this acceptance of all this. And therefore today you say, I don't have work, I can't eat, I cannot have 2 square meals, I can't send my children to school, I don't have money for my treatment, medical treatment. But then Hinduism has to be saved, so Modi has to be voted. So this sort of a mindset that where you want to create, that is the destruction of reason. And once you succeed in destroying that reason, then the control over that control of this false consciousness will become something that's very difficult to destroy. So this has to be a multi-fronted battle that has to be engaged by all of us. Yes, on our day-to-day issues, struggles, etc., those have to be intensified. But along with that, a very sustained struggle against this ideological, pernicious project of theirs, which is based on the destruction of reason and rationality, and therefore the bringing back into the mainstream agenda not only people's issues, but also the issues of scientific temper, scientific approach, of rationality on a rational discourse. That means it has to be a wholesome engagement with the people. And that also, those instruments also they control now, whether it's the media, whether it's the dominance over social media, and your old practices, your unions and ours also, I mean all of us. We say we used to print pamphlets, go house to house, sit down with them, and come back with the confidence we have convinced them. Today, you do that, go house to house, you go and convince them. Even if you convince them, you're meeting them once, as opposed to that, they get 20 WhatsApp messages to the opposite. So your one meeting is washed off. So we also have to get those methods, and official media is under their control, electronic media is under their control, and the fake news, anybody who exposes fake news is arrested, like Zubair is. So they control also the instruments of dissemination of knowledge and information. So in order to break that also, it is a combined task that will have to be engaged and undertaken by all of us. And the point is that in spite of all this, it's only because of this sort of a control, this sort of an authoritarian assaults, this sort of a fascistic onslaught. Even then, in many parts of when the presidential election began, when it started counting the electoral college, BJP on its own does not have a majority even today. If they had not got Navin Patnaik, if they had not got Jagan Mohan, Andhra Chief Minister, if they had not got these other people, the candidate would not have won. But then they have control over these instruments of state power, ED, CBI, etc. So with that, they can destabilize governments. The threat of destabilizing governments, they can get those people to support them under pressure. So the popular thing, if we can strengthen against them, that is when that we'll be able to succeed. So in the final analysis, this idea of India is actually was a very, very forward-looking concept of keeping a country with such immense diversity together. Not only together, making it prosperous and thrive. What the European Union did 60 years after we became independent is what we began in 1947-50. All the countries of European Union being brought together, independent countries, is what India brought together under our constitution. I mean, all these nationalities, all these states, all these regions, and we succeeded all these decades. And we were the fastest growing emerging economy before 2014. And now you see the regression in these 8 years. And that is why this is something in the idea of India that needs to be preserved, safeguarded, for all of our sake. It's not that it's only the Muslims who will get the brunt. What actually eventually will be established is what is called the Manusmriti Raj, which the RSS ideologues have made it very clear. Purusha Sukta is their essential thing, where the head is the Brahmin, the shoulders are the Kshatriyas, the waist is the what you call Vaishya, and then the legs are the Shudras. That is the order. And a woman doesn't find place in that order. They don't simply exist. And therefore, if that is where we will eventually go up to, that is what they wish to. So that this is a retrograde project that has to be defeated. Only then can we also think of our own future, because none of us is going to finally survive. First it may be the Muslims. Like the German pastor once said, first they came for the communists. I said nothing because I was not a communist. Then they came for the Jews. I said nothing because I was not a Jew. They came for the trade unions. I said nothing because I was not a trade unionist. Again, it goes on. Then he said, finally they came for me. And there was nobody left to come for me. So everybody had gone. So that will be the fate of everybody unless we defeat it now. So that is what we all have to undertake. And I'm sure the LIC Union will have to play an important role in facing up this challenge and defeating it. So thank you. This is what I want to share with you.
Comrades, we have heard Comrade Sitaram Yechury for 1.5 hours. Now you can come out with questions and he'll be answering them. Before the question answer session begins, there will be a tea break for exactly 30 minutes, 30. And before going, you can give the questions to the dais, and within 30 minutes when you come back, 30 minutes is exactly 5 o'clock, 5:00 hours. Anyway, 17 hours. So you can come back at 5 o'clock. Meanwhile, you can pass on the cheats also. Thank you.